All right, so I want to start with what exactly led to your ego dissolution.
Sure. So, the events that led up to this experience that we could refer to as ego dissolution were a combination of seeking relief from severe depression and anxiety when I was a teenager, as well as spiritual practices like mindfulness, Vipassana meditation, which is a Buddhist meditation style, as well as a practice called self-inquiry. So at age 15, I suffered from severe depression and anxiety and was looking for a way out of that. I didn't feel comfortable speaking to anybody about it. And so I sort of took it in my own hands and found that spiritual practices were said to bring about peace, were said to bring about relief and overall more well-being in a person's life. And so I began to practice mindfulness and self-observation, becoming the witness of the thoughts in my mind, the emotions in my body. I found a lot of support reading Eckhart Tolle's book called The Power of Now, which highlighted how the sense of separate egoic identity is based in time, past and future, and time is an illusion. So the sense of egoic identity is based on a story, a narrative of the past that we then project into the future. And it seems to not have a lot to do with the present moment. And so what I found was that if I were to rest in the present moment, the sense of self would become a little bit more loose. It had less of a grip on me. I didn't have to identify with it as much, and I could be in the present moment here and now and find peace. And so the more I practiced mindfulness and being present in this moment, I found that that egoic sense of identity was less solid. I could understand that I didn't have to always take that to be who I really was. I found something a little deeper, which we could say is the true self, or the witness, the self with a capital S. Many different ways of referring to what some may call a non-local, spacious field of awareness. And I found myself to actually be that. And when I would rest as that, I felt great peace and increased well-being. So over time, I practiced this more and more intensely because I found it to actually bring relief, to bring peace. On top of that, I began to inquire with this question through the practice of self-inquiry. The question was, who am I? And so I learned from a spiritual tradition called Advaita Vedanta that there's this question we can ask, which is, who am I? And it's not simply just a question. It's actually referred to as a device, as a tool to bring about self-realization or spiritual awakening or the dawning of who we really are. And so I asked this question over and over and over again with great fervor. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Am I this? Am I Brent in Canada? No, that's not who I am, because if I wasn't in Canada, I would still be who I am. Am I this body? Well, if I, had to have some limbs amputated, would I still be who I am? Yeah, I would be. Okay, so it can't be just this body. I went down the list of all the potentials of who I could be, and it was, not any of these things that I could really say who I was. And so there's also a practice that I use in conjunction, which is called neti neti, N-E-T-I-N-E-T-I, neti neti, which means not this, not this. So who am I? Not this. Who am I? Not this. Who am I? Not this. And eventually, with enough intensity, this practice is said to, and this is what the experience was for me, it's said to reveal the true nature of who you are. And one day I asked this question, who am I? And suddenly it dawned on me, I don't exist. This idea of Brent, of me, of I, was a fabrication, an illusion, a character that didn't exist in reality this entire time. And so I saw through that, and this then dawned on me as the first major moment of an ego-dissolution experience. Because I used my awareness and I looked around in my mind, and I could no longer find a center, a rigid sense of self that I could say, this is me, this is I, this is Brent, this is the ego. There were thoughts arising in the space. One thought would arise and that thought would pass away. And then another thought would arise and then that thought would pass away. Maybe there were some emotions within the body. And I could acknowledge all of that phenomena that was fleeting, that was constantly in flux and constantly changing. But I couldn't find any sense of a center there that was persisting, that was always there. Prior to this moment, I thought I was under the assumption or the belief or the delusion that there was an actual center that was present at all times, which I could say was me, which is my ego. But in reality, there was never. And so that was the ego dissolution. Of course, after this followed a whole series of experiences, but I'll pause there and see if that answers your question and if you have anything to explore further.
Oh yeah, it definitely did. Yep, you hit the nail on the head. So the second question is, of course, it was spontaneous.
So it was not spontaneous in the sense that it came completely out of nowhere without any relevant context. It was something to be expected as a result of the practices that I was engaging in. However, when it happened, it took place in a moment that didn't seem as if it was a special moment. I was just sitting in bed and I asked this question, who am I? And the answer dawned on me that, actually I don't exist. The freshness of the realization, the novelty of the realization was unlike anything I could have ever expected. Despite having read from others that had such an experience, despite exploring practices that were said to bring about such an experience, it was completely novel and fresh. So the way it arose in that moment was somewhat spontaneous, but I understood that it was as a result of the practices that I had been doing pretty intensely for a few years leading up to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you basically already answered this question, but there was a great increase in your mental health and mental wellness. You had a greater feeling of, yeah.
Yes, but not initially. Not initially.
After integration?
Yes, yes. Which took a significant amount of time. Initially, there was an understanding that the story of Brent was a story. It wasn't actually something true in an absolute sense. And I said, this brought relief, it brought peace, because I didn't have to identify with this ego mind anymore. I could really rest in the present moment where I felt peace and well-being and calmness. However, this brought distress at the same time and shortly after the experience, because there wasn't language to describe this. I'm doing my best right now to articulate it well, but even now I'm falling short with my words. But in that moment, which was about 13 years ago now, I didn't have the language. I didn't have anybody around me to relate with. I didn't have a community. And it was so profound. I wanted to express it, but I couldn't. And I also fell under some premature delusions of this being total and complete enlightenment, self-realization, or spiritual liberation. And that degree of grandiosity also brought some discomfort, because I thought I was special. I thought I was one of the very few people who have ever had such an experience. If I tried to explain to somebody, of course, they perceived it as incredibly arrogant and grandiose, and that didn't do me any good. It in fact caused people to think that I had some severe mental illness. And so very early on, I learned quickly not to talk about this with anybody unless they had some experience or interest in these matters. It was only after a long period of time that I began to read more and understand and learn from other people that had such an experience about, like you mentioned, the integration phase. And so then I began to work towards deeper and deeper integration.
Yeah, can you describe how you integrated this experience into daily life and your life as Brent?
Yeah. So I began to receive synchronicities guiding me to particular books, spiritual teachers, teachings, material online to help me to make sense of this experience. And so there was a great book by a very incredible spiritual teacher named Adya Shanti. His book is called The End of Your World, Uncensored Straight Talk on the Nature of Enlightenment. And in this book, he breaks down, in an uncensored way, of course, what happens when your world ends. And he's referring to seeing everything as an illusion, not just as the sense of me, I, or the ego, but actually everything. Because I recognize it's all like a dream. Not only is the idea of Brent a dream, it's all like a dream. And so it was, in a sense, like my world had ended. And this book that he had written really beautifully guides a person through these stages of the path towards deeper integration. So I began to explore this material. I began to understand that integration takes time. Though I had awakened out of the illusion of time, paradoxically, it still takes time to integrate such an experience into one's life as Brent. And so what I did was I explored the material. I humbled myself and recognized the journey, in a sense, has actually just begun. Not that it has ended, it had actually just begun. I had to have a lot of reprocessing done on some of my beliefs about what life is, who I am, what I'm here to do. In the past, I was motivated by, for example, insecurity or fear. I had an identity that had maybe been hurt in the past, and I wanted to heal him or find fulfillment of him in the future. So I had thoughts, if I, get lots of money, for example, then this ego will be fulfilled and happy. Well, I realized in that moment of ego dissolution, the ego is not real. And so I have nothing to fear. I don't have to cling to any story, and I don't have to project anything into the future. So something like accomplishing, getting rich wouldn't necessarily satisfy me. So then I said, okay, well, what's the point of doing anything then? What's the point of working or anything, studying? So I had to find new motivations. And so I found that I had shifts taking place where initially I was motivated by fear or lack or wanting to fulfill myself in the future or seeking validation from other people. I had to find new motivations, which were inspiration, passion, excitement, joy, curiosity, rather than fear, dissatisfaction, a feeling of being incomplete, insecurity, etc. And so I had to reprocess, what am I here to do? What motivates me? What's going to move me through life? The same was in relationships. Maybe I wanted relationships because I thought they would fulfill me, or I could use a relationship as a source of validation. Well, I found that wouldn't fulfill me, and I didn't need that. So what was the point of relationships? Oh, well, I could be present with somebody and explore with them and experience deep love with them and whatnot. And so I had to reprocess all of these different things. I used to, work out a lot, and it was out of insecurity. I wanted to fulfill this character called Brent. So I was in the gym lifting weight thinking that I would improve myself and then people would like me. It was all an egoic-based motivation. And so there was a time where I said, I don't need to do that anymore. And yet I found that was causing me to neglect my body. So I had to find new motivation to exercise. Now it wasn't out of hatred for my body. It was actually out of love for my body that I was wanting to exercise and take care of it. And so this is how integration began to take place. New motivations came online. I had to look for them. I had to do shadow work as well. I had to process the insecurity, the doubts, the fears, the story that I had. I had to process this. And so lots of meditation practice, lots of self-love practice, the practice of metta, M-E-T-T-A, is a Buddhist practice of unconditional love. This was very powerful for me as well. And continuing to learn and study and explore spirituality was helpful. The other thing that I did was also I began to practice yoga. I took a yoga teacher training course, and that got me into my body. Because the body is always here and now, regardless of whatever philosophical, spiritual, intellectual, psychological realizations one has about their identity, the ego, the body's still here. You still have to eat, you still have to sleep, you still have to go to the bathroom. That's all necessary. And so the body still demands that you pay attention to it. And so I found that bringing my attention into the body through movement, through being aware of my breath, was helping me to make sense of what I had realized on the level of the mind. And so that also just deepened the realization. It made it more relaxed and comfortable. And naturally around this time is when more and more well-being began to arise. Peace began to arise. New motivations, new love began to arise. And I felt more and more settled over time.
Yeah, thank you for that ad lib about, making being more grounded into your body and making sure it has all its needs met. Because I struggle and still struggle with that, not feeling very connected with my body after all of this spiritual stuff went on in my life. Like, right. Yeah, sometimes I don't feel hunger, but I manage to eat something and then my body will want to eat more. So I'll eat more even though I don't get the feeling. So I think that's kind of weird. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, I had similar experiences. So after the ego-dissolution experience, it felt as if I was hovering outside of my body, witnessing it, very detached. There was a lot of distance between my sense of awareness and my body itself. And so, like you, I felt I didn't really have much sensation, even emotionally as well. There was a lot of distance and detachment. And so I had to, in a sense, I describe it as almost like pulling myself back into my body. And things like food, exercise, walking in nature, stretching, breathing, feeling my emotions were helpful to get me back into my body after this major awakening took place where I felt like I was hovering outside of it.
Yeah. Okay. I found that there's like it's something that everybody who has ever had, an ego dissolution experience, they tend to see notable spiritual and religious figures. Did that ever happen to you?
It did. Yeah. Initially, the traditions and spiritual teachings that I was exploring, didn't have much emphasis on religious figures or archetypes. Zen Buddhism, though there are depictions of various religious figures, it's not an emphasis in Zen Buddhism, which was something that I was interested in. The traditions that I was exploring of Buddhism in general, not very devotional in nature in that way. And so they didn't arise initially. What happened for me was through synchronicity, I was shown various clues, signs, and hints about various things that I should read or explore. So for example, I was in a Buddhist intro to Buddhism course at the time in university, and I didn't read any of the material. I was so dedicated to my spiritual work that I didn't do my homework. I wasn't the best student. But anyway, in this experience, post ego dissolution, I was very disoriented. And I just happened to open the Buddhist text, the Buddhism textbook, to a random page, and that page described the experience I was having. And I said, that's so interesting. I just happened to open this book. So it felt as if some higher intelligence, a presence of, we can use the word the universe or God or source or the flow. Some intelligent force was guiding me along. So I felt that I had made contact with something wise and intelligent and benevolent. But it was impersonal. It didn't come through in any of the personified ways like a presentation of any particular deity at the time. It was only later on, as I began to sit more and more in meditation, I began to have very interesting psychic phenomena begin to arise. I began to experience visions, and I had visions of many different deities, figures, masters of the past. Some I recognized, some I couldn't recognize. Christ, Sri Ramana Maharshi, Anandamayi Ma, Neem Karoli Baba. After his death, I had encounters with Ram Das as well. And so various archetypes would show up in a vision, in a dream, and they would give me a message, a teaching, a lesson, an insight to help me to further develop spiritually. And so these are some things that arose. There's many different ways of interpreting it. One way that we can look at it is, this was from the collective unconscious. These archetypal figures are there in our collective unconscious where our psyche is able to produce them in order to relay messages to us, to let us know that we're, going through a transformation. And so there's certain experiences like that which I had, which were very, very meaningful and helpful for me.
So I know you said your main ego dissolution was from self-inquiry and stuff like that, meditation. But I remember seeing in some of your videos that you have experiences with psychedelics also. Is there like a tangible difference between an ego dissolution through yourself versus with a substance?
Sure. Yeah. So I had explored psychedelics as well and had some significant experiences. But in terms of ego dissolution, they did not persist after the psychedelic trip. So on my first mushroom trip, I had an experience where I recognized that everything and everyone was interconnected, that everything was actually all a part of me and that I wasn't separate. I could see this, I could feel it. But it didn't completely dawn on me that that means that my sense of self, me, I, Brent, the ego, didn't exist. It felt more of, rather than it being a negation of the ego, I didn't see it as a negation. I saw it as, everything really is all connected. But I didn't inquire much deeper into what that would really imply or mean for the sense of ego. Because if it's all really connected and we are all one, well, that would mean I don't exist. I didn't go that far with the realization, and the psychedelic experience didn't reveal that to me at the time. What was interesting with the ego dissolution that I experienced as a result of the spiritual practices was that I was completely sober. And so I couldn't say, this is just psychedelics. This is just a hallucination or drugs. Because I was completely sober, it really landed for me in a very direct and clear way. It didn't come with all sorts of flashy, vivid colors or hallucinations or, funky visuals. It was very clear, cut, and dry. And that difference, I think, was notable because if it was on psychedelics, because there's so much else going on during most psychedelic trips, I may not have put a lot of emphasis on the ego dissolution experience. I may have chalked it up to being nothing more than just a psychedelic trip and gone about my life without actually letting it land or focusing on integration. The psychedelics also, chemically put you into a state, altered states of consciousness where some of these realizations, you're able to have them, but you can't always take them with you once you sober up. And so many people may try and continuously explore psychedelics, trying to get back to that state, whereas for me, it happened when I was sober and it wasn't going away. I remember I went to sleep, I woke up and the experience was still there and it persisted and it has ever since. And so that was a major difference between the psychedelic experiences that I had and this experience happening when I was sober. It felt much more sustainable long term. But with that said, of course, the integration process was still very necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically what I've read through psychedelic research. They said that there would be a better influence on your mental wellness, but it would be more short term if using psychedelics. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. It seems like the psychedelics are a way to fast forward, but then you have to come back once you're, off the psychedelics. And this is why many spiritual traditions don't really encourage psychedelic use. They actually encourage dedicated devotion to, very simple practices like mindfulness, meditation, self-inquiry, because they're much more sustainable long-term to bring about lasting change in one's understanding of oneself.
Mm-hmm. So, I wanted to ask, I know you do a lot of stuff about Kundalini awakenings, and you've experienced one as well. And science doesn't really call it a Kundalini awakening. They call it spontaneous energetic movements and whatever. And so when that energy landed in different points of your body or chakras, did you ever experience like love from the heart chakra, power from the solar plexus, and stuff like that?
Yes, absolutely. I wasn't sure if we were going to go in this direction because I didn't want to make it too complicated for your paper, because I know talking about some of this stuff, especially in an academic setting, can be very difficult. But we can go there, absolutely. So during this moment of ego dissolution, where I saw through the sense of self, ego, me, or Brent, I perceived what I describe as an energetic influx into my head through what the yogis would call my crown chakra. It felt as if universal energy poured into my head and my mind expanded to the ends of the universe. And there was infinite space. It was energetic. And in that infinite space, I could no longer find this sense of me or I. So it brought about an experience of oneness, connection, union with all that is. And so this is a theme that's associated with the crown chakra: oneness, connection to the divine, to the universe, to source. Yoga, of course, yoga means union with the divine. So these are some of the themes that I experienced. It rushed into my head in this way. Some time after that, about 2 years after, I began to feel this warmth in my heart. It was pleasant. It had a bit of a melancholy to it, but it wasn't uncomfortable. And it began to feel as if deep love was bubbling up, was brewing, it was like a little fire began to burn in my heart. Um, and this was fresh for me, but it felt like a great spiritual love. The yogis would call it bhakti, bhakti, Bhakti. And it was just a deep sense of devotion to truth, to God, to Source. And that began to be felt in my heart as a deep love, deep love. And I began to just feel that more and more, more and more. And as I did that, it brought me deeper into the body. And that helped with integration of bringing this realization that took place in my head as this big energetic opening. It brought me into my body where I could feel that realization, but now I could feel it as love in my heart. Before it was just spaciousness and awareness and consciousness, but now it was love in my heart. So same fundamental experience, but different themes as it moved into my heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard about like the differences between a bhakti awakening and a jhana awakening. And so it sounds like you've had both.
Yes. So initially, I was traveling what they call the jnana marga, the path of knowledge. It seemed as if I had reached a certain understanding on that path, a culmination, if you will, through that realization, that ego-dissolution moment. And then from there, all that was left was the bhakti marga, the bhakti path, which was to now just move into my heart and experience love, experience deep love for God, for the universe, for all that is. And that's an ongoing development that I don't think will ever end. There's always a deeper amount of love that we can feel.
Yeah. So far, I've interviewed 2 people, and I think you're both the real deal.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Interesting. Great.
So, as you've integrated this experience into your daily life, do you feel a permanence of ego dissolution? I would say enlightenment for like, myself, but for science, ego dissolution.
Sure, yeah. What I've seen cannot be unseen. And yet, in the same way that if you're in the desert and you see out in the distance something shimmering and you feel that must be some water. And then eventually as you walk further and further towards it, you realize it's not water, it's a mirage. Even after you realize it's a mirage, it still persists. It doesn't go away. So in the same way, I've realized that Brent, the ego, does not exist, and yet paradoxically, it still persists here. That's how I'm here talking to you. And so I know fundamentally that there's no Brent here, that the ego is not real. The Buddhists call this no self or anatta. I know this fundamentally, and yet I'm able to use this illusion for practical purposes. There are times, however, though they become more and more rare as my journey unfolds and as I continue to do my spiritual work, but there are times that I may become triggered emotionally and I may regress to a point where I've forgotten that Brent is not real and I'm fully identified with the sense of identity. It doesn't last, at least at this point in my journey, it doesn't last more than a few seconds before I have some remembrance, some realization, some insight, or I quickly turn to a spiritual practice. But it still does happen. And so I don't want to say it's permanent, perfect, seamless. It can be a little, it can flicker at times. The difference at this point on my journey from earlier on is that at this point on my journey, I'm okay with it. I don't have a problem with that. That's fine too. Very early on in my journey, I would be hard on myself. Oh, I believe myself to be the ego again. Oh, I'm not doing good on my spiritual journey. I forgot. Now I say, no, that's okay. It's part of being human. It's part of being human.
Yep. Sometimes, even though you know you're playing a game with yourself, you still get on your own damn nerves.
Right. Yeah. Because there's emotional energy there. There's emotional energy that is very strong. There's momentum. There's history behind it. And so it can sometimes take us away on a bit of a ride. And that's why, of course, even after a moment of ego dissolution, spiritual practice is so necessary.
Yeah. Forgot what dude's name was, but he said, oh, it's Ramakrishna. He said, you still gotta polish a bowl or something, he said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Ongoing polishing. Yeah.
So those are basically all my questions. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Well, I hope that I've given you a lot to contribute to your work. On the topic of well-being, I can just so you have the information, I can report that I don't suffer from depression or anxiety. In fact, I sort of, for the past few years, I've been tracking how often I get emotionally dysregulated. And in the past 6 months or so, about 5 to 10 hours, I would say, collectively across the 6 months of emotional dysregulation that has been mild on a scale of 0 being totally calm and 10 being in a blackout rage. I would say the emotional dysregulation maybe about a 2, maybe a 3. So if that means anything to you, about 5 to 10 hours of emotional dysregulation across about 6 months. So generally speaking, quite peaceful here. So definitely an increase in well-being, increase in overall life satisfaction. I feel aligned with my values as well. My values being things like collaboration, connection, curiosity. I feel aligned with my work as well. What happened as a result of this ego dissolution was I recognized deep sense of oneness, that I'm connected to all that is. A deep sense of love eventually came online in my heart, which brought about compassion. So this is why I'm inclined towards supporting other people as a spiritual teacher, but also as a therapist. And so I get a lot of purpose and meaning out of doing that work, and it's aligned with the realization that I've had. And while I don't always, especially as a therapist, I don't always share spiritual things, I would like to bring other people to a point where they can also experience increased well-being, because I know how profound it is, not only for us as individuals, but the more that we're all feeling peace and well-being, it improves the world overall. So this is just the general trajectory that my life has taken as a result of the ego dissolution experience.
Yeah, that's very beautiful. Thank you for your hard work, because we definitely need more people like the both of us in mental health, because I feel like Western psychology doesn't really know much about spiritual emergence and ego dissolution and stuff like this yet.
Yeah. So it's great that you're going out on a limb to do your work on this topic in particular. It's very, very necessary, and I think this will be, it is at the leading edge of psychology today. This is what these themes, very, very important, very, very important. Yeah. So if that's everything you need from me, I'm just curious a little bit about your work and your journey.
Oh, well, 3 years ago, when I was about, how old am I now? When I was about 23, I I did something similar to a puja. Made a I made a goddess altar, and I started offering stuff and food objects to the goddess. And then I felt like this big heat around my body. It wasn't quite up my spine yet, just around. It felt like there was flames coming from the heavens or something. And and after some time, I met this person, and there was like, I could feel that this person was just me. And then after having some interactions with this person, with this person, I could feel like the energy start at my sacral chakra, or your pelvis area. And that whole ordeal was like an emotional roller coaster, but I know it was just stuff being removed from me to make me into my best self. And recently, I find myself in this magnificence of being, and I feel like totally clear in that it's not really the end, but I'm doing all the side quests because the main quest is done, but you're still being in the world and helping others. But I never really thought I'd be in the field of psychology, because before this, I was at a different school studying cellular biology, because I was like, I was always interested in the science side of things, and I didn't really see myself as a psychologist, but here I am. And I thought that since this experience made me feel so good about things and good about myself, and I'm not really in that negative mental state that I was before. If I have like a secret to feeling better, then I should give it to other people too. So I feel like in order to reach the most people, we should go into academia and do research, because I feel like the neuroscience and psychology industries are going into the wrong direction by studying psychedelics, because in their papers they're like, it works, but it's on a short term. But I know that if people can, dissolve their social constructs and their identity, they will be much better in the long run. Because really, even though there are mental illnesses that are physically visible in the brain, like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, most of what it is that people are clinging so hard to this illusion, but they don't know it. I feel like most people these days are kind of like renunciates, but here in the West, they don't have that language. We're just depressed.
Yeah, that's a very interesting insight. Yeah, yeah, amazing, amazing. Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that you're out there doing this work. Like I was saying, when this first happened to me, I didn't have any language. I didn't have anybody to explain or understand. And it was very, very difficult to navigate. And there's, anything that we can do to just raise awareness about this being a possibility and that it's not mental illness. It actually makes way for really incredible mental wellness after enough support and integration. Is there are you in need of any other resources? Anything interesting that you're looking for? I can share some things with you that you might find helpful.
Oh, yeah, definitely do that. I do have a small survey that I'm sharing around online. If you would mind, could you share that with their community? Because
Sure.
it's a ego dissolution survey.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. Now, have you heard of Cheetah House?
No, I have not.
Okay. So Cheetah House, it's a weird name. I don't know why they've called it Cheetah House. But Cheetah House is run by some academics, some psychologists, and it's for those experiencing meditation-related distress.
Oh, uh-huh.
And one, I'm sure you're familiar with the various themes that can arise as so there's all sorts of various phenomena that can arise from meditation, of course. But this link, the second link I've shared, addresses the sense of a change in narrative self, ego dissolution, and whatnot. I'll invite you to explore this website. They have a list of symptoms of things that can arise as a result of meditation-related distress. They have some material, some courses. They have actually an entire bibliography. If you go to research, they have tons of research as well. You can just browse around. There's a lot that they've got going on here. There's a guy on YouTube called Gary Weber. And he had total dissolution of the sense of self, including all self-referential thoughts. Let me see if I can find a video that might interest you. Here's one. So are you aware of the default mode network? Yeah, okay. So he's a brilliant guy, Gary Weber. And this link I just shared is called The End of Suffering and the Default Mode Network. And he's something, really brilliant. He's a brilliant guy. And his website is actually called Happiness Beyond Thought. So it looks like his website's not up. But I think his work in particular is right up your alley for your research. He's quite literally exploring exactly what your papers and stuff are about. So you can explore there too. Yeah. Okay. All right. I hope I was helpful for you today.
Oh, yeah, that was phenomenal. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. And, when your work is done, I'd love to give it a read if you want to share.
Yeah, I definitely send it to all who participated because y'all are greatly appreciated.
Oh, great. Okay. Nadia, we'll be in touch then, okay?
All right.